We have Gargee Ghosh, who's director, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And Gargee, my question for you is that Bill Gates led a process at Davos to interrogate all the innovations and options to achieve a more equitable and private sector friendly development finance summit. Can you tell us your view on how we have progressed so far and whether you think we are on the path to positive FFD outcomes, and where you think there's an opportunity to really improve the participation of the private sector in the financing of growth and development in Africa?
Thanks, Barbara. I'll be short so we can get to the discussion. So first on FFD, I've heard it described as a sort of mature conference, which I think is about right. If you're inclined to believe that rock stars and the Pope and a G7 government were going to solve development finance, this wasn't the conference for you. But if you're inclined, as I am, to think that development finance is a collection of pretty heterogeneous needs and sources and intermediaries, I think that's what was represented, and that's about accurate. We were asked by the government of Ethiopia to lead a series of investor labs in the lead up to Davos, or to Addis, to try and capture where some of the energy enthusiasm could be focused coming out of FFD on linking the interests of the private and public sector. Let me say before I go into what we learned from that, just a bit about who we are. So the Gates Foundation is a privately funded philanthropy based in Seattle. We spend about $3 billion a year concentrated in about 4 sectors: health, agriculture, primarily smallholder agriculture, financial services, and water. We also have a domestic education program here in the U.S. Our main business is grants and concessional finance. We work closely with the private sector, even in our grant-making portfolio, primarily in funding research and development. But we increasingly see our role as well as sort of bridging the gap between private and public interests. And so we've developed a pretty robust portfolio of instruments that do that. For example, guarantees. We do a lot of volume guarantees. We partnered with Merck, for example, to establish a volume guarantee for a contraceptive implant to be supplied to women around Africa. We do a lot of direct investing, for example, in Bcash, to support mobile payment platforms in Bangladesh. And we accompany that with grants to build new products, improve analytics, and provide sort of risk mitigation. So I won't say more than my colleagues on the sort of individual deals and what needs to happen there. But in the course of these investor labs, we also focused on domestic capital markets and where what could happen there. So 2 things to maybe put to the group. First, obviously, we focused a lot on the lack of long-term capital in local currency. And we're quite excited about, I think, the African Domestic Bond Fund that the African Development Bank is contemplating. I think that has the potential to create a sort of benchmark for an African local currency fixed income strategy for investors. That's pretty exciting. And then when you look at sort of development impact, I think the question of municipal and local government financing is yet to be cracked. These are often the frontline providers of basic services. They're certainly who we work with a lot. And yet, as everyone knows, these entities are not capable yet of internally generated revenue. A lot of that has to do with central governments needing to establish policies and legal frameworks that authorize local governments to collect their own revenues, but there's equal sort of capacity building at the local government level. And so we're excited there about sort of subnational pooled finance facilities where I think there may be scope to pool risk and sort of make progress there. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Gargee, I thank you. And having participated in several of your FFD investor labs, I think it was extraordinary per the point of how the private sector can learn from the private sector. There was great exchange about all the innovation being done to make bankable health-related transactions and funds and really leading the charge as well as other innovations.
Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.